Hello, my name is Christine Muse, and I am the coordinator of the Broome County Traffic Safety Program. I'm here to talk to you about how to stay safe on the road with our Hang Up, Buckle Up, Stay Sober, and Just Drive presentation. Motor vehicle crashes are the leading cause of death for teenagers. We're hoping that the information you learn in this presentation will help you to make smart and safe decisions behind the wheel. Our goal is to keep younger drivers alive. Some things we'll focus on are the 4 deadly Ds. Drinking, drugs, distractions, and drowsiness seem to be the most common causes of younger driver crashes. It's also important to understand how to share the road safely with other users. Being a considerate, courteous, and calm driver, as well as following the speed limit, keeps everyone safe. Inexperience plays a part here. You're new behind the wheel, and it takes time to become a safe driver. That's why in New York State, the graduated licensing laws exist, and as a new driver, you should be familiar with what those restrictions are. Finally, we will discuss seatbelt use. Seatbelt use is the lowest amongst young drivers and passengers. The best way to protect yourself in a crash is to wear your seatbelt. Let's talk a little bit more about why this is so important. To understand seatbelts, we need to understand crash dynamics, and it really comes down to simple physics. An object in motion will remain in motion at its original speed until something stops it. Think about how this might apply in a car crash. Everything that isn't secured down in your vehicle is going to move towards the crash. This includes unrestrained occupants. Seatbelts keep us in our seats during a crash. You may have heard people say that they don't wear their seatbelt because they are able to hold themselves back in a crash. This just isn't true, and quite impossible to do when you factor in crash forces. There's a simple formula that we use to explain this. Weight times speed equals restraining force. For example, a 10-pound baby traveling in a car that crashes at 30 miles an hour will still need 300 pounds of restraining force to keep that child from moving. Now I want you to think for a moment about how much you weigh, and let's say you're traveling in a car that crashes at 60 miles an hour. What is your restraining force? Are you able to hold yourself back? Keeping in mind how things move in a crash, what are the 3 collisions in a car crash? The 3 collisions are vehicle, human, and internal. Remember, an object in motion will stay in motion until something stops it. So in the vehicle collision, what else can stop a vehicle besides its brakes? It could be another car, a tree, a building, or some other object. The human collision is where seatbelts come into play. The human is still traveling at the same speed that they crashed at. So what will they collide with? Hopefully it's their seatbelt. But if not, unbuckled passengers may collide with the interior of the car, such as the steering wheel, dashboard, windshield, or even other passengers. And in the last collision, the internal collision, organs that are free to move around your body will collide with other organs or bones. This might result in internal bruising or bleeding, and if you hit your head on something, possibly a traumatic brain injury. Wearing a seatbelt can help reduce your chance for injury by keeping you in your seat and your body in alignment. For whatever reason, people buckle up far less in the back seat than in the front. Have you ever heard of the term backseat bullet? Unbuckled backseat passengers can move around the car, colliding with other passengers and sometimes even ending up in the front seat. It's always safest to have everyone in the car buckled. Let's watch this video about unbuckled backseat passengers while keeping that formula you just learned in mind along with the 3 collisions. Now, this video is a bit graphic, so if that bothers you, feel free to look away.
Like most victims, Julie knew her killer. It was her son. He wasn't wearing his seatbelt. After crushing her to death, he sat back down. Think.
As we have already learned, seatbelts protect us in a crash. But what are the 5 ways seatbelts provide protection? First and foremost, they prevent ejection. Believe it or not, you're safer if you stay in the vehicle. Trust me, we will watch a video next that demonstrates this. They spread the crash forces over the entire body, and the way that they do that is by contacting the body at the strongest parts of its structure, the shoulders and hips. There's a reason why seatbelts are designed to go across our chest and over our lap. Remember, these crash forces we keep talking about are just moving energy, and when energy gets concentrated in one part of the body, it causes injury. Seatbelts also help us ride down the crash by helping us stop slowly to allow the crash forces to spread as opposed to a quick and abrupt stop. Think about catching an egg. You must slow the speed of the egg down, otherwise it would break if you caught it abruptly. And lastly, they protect our head, neck, and spinal cord by keeping us in line in our seats and away from other parts of the vehicle. Now remember I mentioned how it was safer to stay in the car? Let's look at this rollover crash. You may have heard people say that they don't put on their seatbelt because if they crash, they want to be thrown free from the crash. In a rollover crash, if you're not wearing your seatbelt, you are more likely to be ejected out of the car. If you're ejected, you will be thrown out of the vehicle in the same direction as the vehicle is traveling and at the same speed. You'll probably hit some things on your way out too, like the window. In this video, the driver is thrown directly onto the pavement and then unfortunately is run over by another vehicle. In other cases, we've seen the vehicle roll over the ejected occupant, or sometimes only a partial ejection happens, leaving a body part hanging out of the car. Either way, it's unlikely you'll survive. New York State's seatbelt law recently changed. According to the law, who does not have to wear their seatbelt? The new law states everyone must wear their seatbelt, regardless of age or seating position. This protects everyone in the car. And one more thing, wear your seatbelt correctly. Don't put the shoulder belt behind your back or under your arm. When the belt is behind your back, you'll sandwich forward in a crash. And if you put it under your arm, all the crash forces will be concentrated on your ribs. Not only is it unsafe to wear it wrong, but you can also get a ticket for it. Let's turn our attention now to those deadly Ds from earlier, starting with drugs and drinking. Alcohol and marijuana are probably the most common substances used. Alcohol is considered a central nervous system depressant. This means that it slows your body and brain down. Marijuana has similar effects. For any of you already driving, I'm sure you've experienced times when you've needed to make a quick decision behind the wheel. But with alcohol or marijuana in your system, it will take your brain longer to recognize and react to dangerous situations on the road. For example, it might take your brain twice as long to tell your foot to move from the gas pedal to the brake. These extra few seconds can make the difference between a crash or not. Remember, any substance, whether it's prescription drugs, over-the-counter medications, or other drugs such as stimulants, narcotics, and hallucinogens that change the way you feel would change the way you drive, and no amount of alcohol or drugs are safe to mix with driving. I'm sure you've heard the terms BAC and tolerance before, but are they the same thing? BAC, or blood alcohol content, is the measurement of alcohol in your blood. Tolerance is how well your body can handle that alcohol. People that have a high tolerance when it comes to alcohol are less likely to show physical signs of impairment. It's important to understand why these are different. Just because someone isn't showing signs of impairment doesn't mean they don't have a high BAC or are safe to drive. It may mean that they have a high tolerance for large amounts of alcohol, so their body won't show as many signs of impairment. In the same respect, someone who has visible signs of impairment, such as slurred speech, difficulty walking, or blurry vision, may not have had necessarily a lot to drink and register a low BAC. They may just have a low tolerance, which is why they are showing signs of impairment so easily. In either scenario, both are still impaired and neither are safe to drive. New York State works on a point system. Certain traffic violations gain you points on your license. The more points you have, the more likely you are to lose your license. How many points on your license is a DWI? The answer is 0. It is considered a criminal offense, and depending on the severity, it can result in a misdemeanor or a felony. Drivers under the age of 21 will lose their license automatically for 6 months, and a second offense will result in suspension of your license for an entire year. Getting a DWI is expensive. What do you think is the average cost of a DWI? The average cost of a DWI is between $9,000 and $10,000. Imagine what you could do with $10,000 in your pocket right now. Probably buy a lot of fun things, but unfortunately, you'll be paying for a lawyer, court fees, and surcharges. You'll also most likely have ignition interlock device fees, increased insurance rates, alcohol evaluation costs, as well as numerous other things that will pop up along the way. But the ultimate price in all of this is hurting or killing someone else because of a poor decision you made.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Woo! Woo!
In New York, impaired driving led to over 9,000 crashes and 61,000 tickets in 2017. Do your friends a favor and speak up. Make a plan to get home safe.
Impaired driving is completely preventable. We are all in this together, and you are a key part in keeping impaired drivers off the road. If you know someone isn't safe to drive, there's lots of things you can do to keep them off the road. Take their keys. Find them a ride, whether it's a bus, taxi, or ride-sharing service. Take them home yourself, or let them stay at your house until they are sober. Sometimes, in the worst situations, you may have to call 911. Nobody wants to call the police on a friend, but the trouble that they will get in will be far less than if they end up crashing or hurting themselves or someone else. As for yourself, avoid using alcohol and drugs altogether. But if you do find yourself in a situation, don't drive. Have a plan ahead of time to get home safely.
It's party night. You've got the drinks, and the playlist is bumpin'. Being a good host means taking steps so your guests avoid the serious consequences of impaired driving. Here are some tips. Collect keys to make sure impaired guests don't get behind the wheel. Nominate a bartender to serve measured drinks, recommend water breaks, avoid serving underage guests, and concoct tasty alcohol-free options. Every party needs great snacks. Plus, a full stomach helps slow the effects of alcohol. Be ready to step in if anyone overindulges. Keep an eye out for loss of coordination, slowed reactions, or sudden mood swings. Make it easy for people to find a sober ride home using a taxi or ride-sharing app, public transportation, or a designated driver. For more tips on how to be a good host, visit our website and download the Have a Plan app. Always have a plan to get home safe.
Let's talk now about the third deadly D, distractions. Distractions are the main causes of crashes in our area, and again, are completely preventable. There are 3 main driving distractions: manual, visual, and cognitive. Manual distractions are anything that will take your hands off the wheel, such as eating, drinking, or playing with the radio. Visual distractions are anything that will take your eyes off the road. Maybe it's looking at another passenger or something out the window. Cognitive distractions are anything that will take your mind or focus off your driving. So what is the most common driver distraction that involves all three of these components? If you answered cell phones, you would be right. It's so easy after you become a confident and experienced driver to try to do more behind the wheel, like take a quick call or answer that text or email. But multitasking while driving can be deadly. Believe it or not, our brain cannot multitask. When we think we are doing two things at the same time, we really are not. What's happening is our brain is switching focus back and forth between those two activities very quickly. And every time our brain must switch focus, a fraction of time passes. So on the road, this may result in a slower reaction time. Sound familiar? We talked about this when it came to drugs and alcohol. Too many tasks can overload your brain and slow it down to making those quick and sometimes life-saving decisions behind the wheel. Additionally, when we overload our brain with information to process, our brain can't handle it all, so it tends to filter information out. When this happens, it's called inattention blindness. Think about this. You're driving on the road, talking on your cell. Your brain may end up filtering out that stop sign or that pedestrian crossing in front of you. The more tasks your brain tries to handle, the more likely you are to make mistakes. Driving is already a complicated task. Why add more to the mix? Let's watch a video that helps explain this a bit better.
Sometimes our mind wanders, and when we snap back to reality, we have no idea what we missed or how long we were gone. Daydreaming isn't the only thing that causes this inattention blindness. When we talk on the phone while driving, there are periods when we go blind to our environment without realizing it. So billboards, cars, kids playing, even stop signs and red lights can pass us by unnoticed. Certain things may seem harmless, but some activities just aren't safe to combine. Our brain is not wired to pay attention to more than one complex task at a time. What we're actually doing when we think we're multitasking is quickly shifting our focus from one activity to another. So while our mind is engaged in applying makeup, arguing with backseat drivers, fumbling for a water bottle, or a conversation, it's blind to the road. In fact, drivers are 4 times more likely to crash while talking on the phone, and 23 times more likely while texting. Driving can feel uneventful, but it really takes our full attention to keep the car on the road. We're surrounded by distractions that can hijack our focus. Whether we let them is up to us.
Vehicle and cell phone technology encourage us to use a cell phone while driving by allowing us to use our phone hands-free. But is it safe? The correct answer is no, not really. Yes, Bluetooth allows us to keep our hands on the wheel while driving, eliminating the manual distraction. Both hands on the wheel gives you better control of the vehicle. However, it doesn't eliminate the cognitive distraction. Your brain is still going to be distracted by that conversation. And you need your full attention on your driving in order to do it safely. We need both hands on the wheel, both eyes on the road, and your mind focused on your driving.
Imagine this. You're driving down the road, paying attention to traffic, people, dogs. You're watching out for all the crazy stuff that can happen when you're driving. Good job. Okay, let's make it harder. Imagine you have to keep driving at high speed in a busy area, but now you have to do it blindfolded. Sounds ridiculous, right? Of course it is. It would be downright insane. If you talk on a cell phone or text when you're driving a car, you're practically doing the same thing. You're at the wheel of a big disaster waiting to happen. You don't see what's coming. You're not in control. Talking and texting virtually blindfold you, taking your attention away from driving and putting yourself and others at serious risk. In fact, studies have shown that drivers on the phone have worse reaction times than many drunk drivers. Gabbing on a phone while you drive means you're up to 6 times more likely to get in an accident. And using a hands-free speakerphone or headset doesn't help. You can still be just as distracted, according to scientific studies. Texting while you're driving increases your chances of a crash by a whopping 24 times. That's scary, but what's even scarier is that 70% of teens in a recent survey admitted they'd been in a car with a driver who was texting. If you're in a car with a distracted driver, even your parents, you have the right to speak up and ask them to stop. Each year, distractions caused by cell phones contribute to more than 1.5 million crashes, more than 600,000 injuries, and nearly 6,000 deaths. These numbers represent real people with lives just like yours. So why is distracted driving so dangerous? The answer lies in our brains, which aren't really designed to do more than one thing at a time. Don't believe it? Try taking a math test at a Lady Gaga concert. Not easy. Also, you only have one pair of eyes. So taking your eyes off the road to text is a recipe for catastrophe. When you drive distracted, you're dangerous, and in many places, you're breaking the law. So even though it's tempting, please put down that phone, think about the dangers to you and others, and just drive.
So now we come to our last deadly D, drowsiness. Younger drivers are at a higher crash risk for drowsy driving than any other driver. We all know you're busy, and you tend to stay up late. Hey, I get it. There's a lot going on in your lives right now. So the big question is, how many hours of sleep should a younger driver be getting every night in order to not be tired? Younger drivers need about 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night. Do you get that? Drowsy driving is considered a form of distracted driving because when we are tired, our brain is slow to decision making. Are we starting to see a pattern here? Just like drugs, alcohol, and distractions, drowsiness too affects our brain and our ability to drive safely. The best way to avoid drowsy driving is by getting enough sleep to begin with. But if you do feel tired while driving, it's important that you recognize those signs and do something about it. It only takes a few seconds of your eyes being closed for a crash to happen. A few warning signs might be yawning, highway hypnosis, which is like zoning out and not remembering the last miles you've driven, difficulty keeping your eyes open, drifting from lane to lane and hitting rumble strips, missing traffic signs or exits, difficulty keeping your head up, and tailgating. If you find any of these things happening, pull over where it is safe to do so and take a quick nap. Drinking coffee, rolling down the windows, or playing loud music are just quick fixes. Remember, sleep is the only cure. So it's time now to talk about sharing the roadway with other users, and up first are motorcycles. Motorcycles are very different from cars. Can you think of one way a motorcycle is more vulnerable on the road than a car? You may have thought of a few different ways, but here are some that make motorcycles more at risk for a crash. Motorcycles are obviously smaller than cars, which make them difficult to see. As a driver, be sure to always be watching for them, especially during prime riding season. They also do not have self-canceling turn signals. So if you're on the road with a motorcycle, make sure you know whether that motorcycle is really turning or not. Sometimes it just might be that they forgot to turn off their signal. And lastly, motorcycles can downshift and slow down without ever activating their brake lights. So if you're traveling behind a motorcycle, give them plenty of space. You may end up creeping up on them without even realizing.
How close does a biker have to be before you see them? Here. Here. Or here. At a junction, look, then look again. Think, take longer to look for bikes.
Bicyclists and pedestrians have a right to be on the roadway too. Here are a few key tips to keep everyone on the roadway safe. If you approach a bicyclist on the road, approach with caution and slow down. Fast-moving vehicles can actually throw a bicycle off balance. Bicyclists should be on the road either in the bike lane or as far off to the right-hand side as possible. However, many times debris in the road, potholes, or uneven road surfaces can make it dangerous for bicyclists, so it is common for a bicyclist to move into the driving lane to avoid these hazards. So be extra watchful in case the rider moves into your lane. Give bicyclists plenty of clearance when passing them, at least 3 feet. If you happen to be the bicyclist, remember that you must do your part too and follow the same traffic rules as a vehicle. When we work together, we can keep everyone safe. Now, as far as pedestrians, again, be extra watchful and cautious of pedestrians near the roadway, especially when there are no sidewalks. If a pedestrian must walk on the road, they should be facing traffic as far left to the road as possible. Be sure to slow down and stop for pedestrians using the crosswalk. Watch for them when you are turning and be mindful of other vehicles that may be slowing down or stopping for a pedestrian that you might not see. Again, just like bicycles, pedestrians must do their part and follow their own set of traffic rules in order to keep everyone safe. So since this situation is all too common, I thought I'd clarify one of the pedestrian laws. When there isn't a crosswalk sign or signal and a pedestrian wants to cross, who must yield? Is it the pedestrian or the car? The correct answer is the pedestrian. However, the misconception is that the car should be the one that yields. Many of the rules of the road work because they are based on predictability and expectations. Yes, a driver is going to do their best not to hit you if you're crossing the street. But if you're not in a designated place to cross, that driver may not expect you or predict that you'd be there. So as a pedestrian, be sure to yield to them and not assume that they see you. One more thing on pedestrian safety. Let's talk about signals. Signals are there to help keep you safe, but they only work if you operate them correctly and drivers obey them. These pictures represent a few newer signals in our area. The picture on the left is a pedestrian hybrid beacon, and there is one located in downtown Binghamton by the Broome County Arena, and it's likely we'll be seeing more of these types of signals popping up around town. For a pedestrian to cross the road safely, they must press the signal button and wait for the light to turn. The light will turn like a traffic light to solid red. Drivers going through this area should be on the lookout for the changing lights and be prepared to stop if necessary. The picture on the right shows signals known as RRFBs, or rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Again, these signals only work if the crossing pedestrian pushes the button to activate the lights. These lights will flash yellow to indicate to drivers a pedestrian is waiting to cross. So if you are driving through these areas with these signals, be on the lookout for crossing pedestrians. Remember, if we all do our part, we can keep everyone safe. So lastly, let's talk about sharing the roadway with other cars. The best way to share the roadway safely with other cars is by following the speed limit. Unfortunately, speed accounts for more than 25% of all fatal crashes, and younger drivers are more likely to speed than older drivers. Speed limits are there for a reason and are established to make driving as safe as possible for everyone. Remember, the faster you travel, the longer it will take your vehicle to stop, and the harder it will be to control and maneuver. So the few seconds you may save by going fast, it's not worth the risk of a crash. Speeding can sometimes escalate to aggressive driving and even road rage. Do you know the difference between these two? Aggressive driving is the operation of a motor vehicle in a selfish, bold, or pushy manner, without regard for the rights or safety of the other users of the streets and highways. Road rage, on the other hand, is assault with the motor vehicle that is caused by an incident that occurred on the roadway. Don't try to win with an aggressive driver. Aggressive driving can escalate quickly into road rage. It's not worth your life. So stay calm, be courteous, and considerate of all users on the road. So finally, let's talk about how inexperience plays a role in younger driver crashes and how the different laws help prevent them. As a new driver, you haven't had much time or practice behind the wheel. As you become a seasoned driver, you will be more equipped to handle different driving situations that arise. New York State has placed restrictions on new drivers to keep them safe. These restrictions are called the graduated licensing laws. One of the laws addresses how many people you can have in the car with you. So how many passengers under the age of 21 can a driver with a junior license have in the car with them without a supervising driver present? So the answer is 1 passenger under the age of 21. We know the more friends you pile into the car with you, the more likely you are to crash. The only exception to this is if the passenger is an immediate family member, such as a brother or sister. Here's a quick summary of some of the other restrictions. You can find the complete list of restrictions on the DMV website. The first step in getting your license is taking your permit test. With a learner's permit, you must always have a supervising driver in the car with you. Next, after passing your road test, you'll receive a junior license. On a junior license, you're allowed to drive alone between the hours of 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. to school, work, and other social activities. You're also allowed to drive alone between the hours of 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. to school and work, but not to things such as sporting events or social gatherings. School activities are considered credit-bearing courses, so driving home from a school dance or play doesn't count. Next is your senior license. A senior license is granted when you either turn 18 or you've taken a driver's education course. With this license, you have no restrictions. Again, these laws are in place to keep you safe. If you're not following them, there could be consequences for you and your parents. So in conclusion, we want you to remember those 4 deadly Ds: drinking, drugs, distractions, and drowsiness. And what do these things all have in common? They are all preventable actions. You have control over what happens inside your car. So always put on that seatbelt. Respect other roadway users. Obey the speed limit. Follow the laws and license restrictions, and do your best to make smart choices behind the wheel, not only to protect yourself, but to protect your passengers and the other people on the road. Happy driving, everyone. Stay safe, and thank you.